if people find out that you're a witch and they're like, oh, you're going to cast a spell on me, you're going to turn me into a frog. And it's like, well, one, no, because the laws of physics, and but also then like, no, because I don't really care. I don't think about you. Like, what? Oh god, it's so funny. In today's video, we're going to talk about Baneful Magick, the context with which people might choose to cast Baneful Magicks, and practices that are involved and included historically and in contemporary occult practices. So do get yourself a nice hot drink, settle back, relax and enjoy. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. I hope that you are doing well and looking after yourselves. I am really happy to see you again. I thought it was a good time to talk about this topic because I recently shared a video where I performed a ritual with Lilith, and that was all about the resistance. Obviously I've spoken out a lot about all of the injustices that are going on in the world on the channel, so you know how I feel about that. But in a recent video when I was talking about glamour magic and touching on certain themes, I thought it's quite important that we talk about some darker aspects of magical practice as well, and that's something I've not really touched upon. And so I'd just like to talk about it from a historical perspective and cultural perspective, obviously from this practitioner's viewpoint in terms of what I've learned, what I've read about and discovered during my time practicing. I don't want to go into too many personal accounts or details today. I would be open potentially to creating a video like that for Patreon if it is of interest. So we'll see how this video goes, and maybe potentially that's a video that can go on Patreon at some point. So before we get started, Baneful Magick is usually what it's referred to today. However, in the past it has been referred to as other terms such as black magic or dark magic. Essentially it means a malevolent kind of magic. However, black magic, whilst it's historically been used to describe a magic that is more malevolent than white magic, and also grey magic is a term that's used as well for that sort of middle path. However, it is known to be problematic because it's easily conflated with racism and it's become quite a racial slur. So what it has ended up doing is demonising the practice of black African traditions. Any African or Caribbean or indigenous spiritual kind of culture and practice has sort of been demonized as a result of the use of that terminology. So these days most practitioners will refer to a kind of malevolent practice or curses, hexes, jinxes as baneful magic. That's usually the term that most practitioners will use when describing it. It can also be referred to as malefic magic or malevolent magic, as I mentioned previously. So first of all, let's just define for the purposes of the video what baneful magic is. Baneful magic is intended to cause harm, misfortune, bring about revenge or justice, quite often justice to be fair, and also to protect and sometimes to send stuff back that is being sent to a person. It's also important to talk about the kind of ancient history of curses, because curses have been used for millennia across space and time since human beings have existed, because human beings tend to annoy each other and do things to hurt each other, and it's no different from there being wars and such. However, a lot of contemporary magical practices have come out of traditions. We can see the history of some of the curses in antiquity in things like curse tablets in the ancient Mediterranean. So these were found in Greece and Rome, Egyptian magic as well. There's quite a lot of that kind of thing. The PGM, the Greek Magical Papyri, is a good source for that kind of magic. Some of it is quite strange to read, some of the sorts of things that people wanted to do. But essentially, curse tablets were sheets, thin sheets of like metal or lead, and people would inscribe them with curses written in the native language or with symbols. Usually it was thought of as a message to the gods, so symbolically it would be sent to the gods to curse someone. They have been found sort of like folded and pierced with nails and buried with people, and in those times it was also something that everybody did. It was one of those things, it was just sort of a way that people influenced the world around them, and oftentimes it would be to do with sort of business issues or legal problems and lovers and things like that. So many problems running the gamut. There were also curse tablets in ancient Egypt as well. Usually pottery or clay was utilised in that case. Of course, we have European folk magic. People were called cunning men, cunning women. They performed all kinds of spells, and if you are lucky enough to be able to visit the Museum of Witchcraft and Magic in Boscastle in Cornwall, there are some great examples of cursing, and you can literally feel the energy off of some of the items that were used to curse people, and some of them were really nasty. You can really feel it and see it, and it's so interesting to see some of the folk magic that's been used over time. So as well as curses, these cunning folk would perform all kinds of healing, and a lot of it was, you know, healing on the laying of hands and the use of psalms and prayers, but then they also performed this more malefic magic as well, and that was just something that they did. A lot of colonisation as well has influenced the continuation and the development of many types of baneful magic, whether it be like folk practices or more sort of traditional like Voudon spiritual practices. I think that these, and hoodoo, definitely conjure work, root work, developed out of colonisation. Of course, there's hoodoo and root work, conjure work. This is a form of African American folk magic essentially, and it comes out of slavery. So it is literally rooted in resistance, and for that reason there are still remaining workings that can seem, to today's society in a contemporary world, can seem perhaps not justified. However, from where they were coming out of, from people who were literally at risk of death, and you know, they were being enslaved and they were fearful for their life, you know, you can see how these traditions have been used and then passed on, and they are closed practices. You know, something like hoodoo, it's widely available to read about, but I would not, as a white person who doesn't come from that lineage, I would not then, you know, adopt that. So cultural appropriation is a really important thing to understand as well when we're exploring this. So magic was served to protect people essentially, because there was not really protection for black people in those times. There are also other cultures in Europe, of course, and in other parts of the world that I do not know about, and you know, all of these practices that I'm mentioning are not something that I know huge amounts other than like a few books that I've read. So it's something that is really interesting to do your research about. But folk magics in England, Scotland and Wales, it's very, very interesting. Cornwall, that kind of thing for me is sort of bread and butter, and Gemma Gary is great for that kind of thing, as well as Steve Patterson and other authors that Troy Books stock as well, so you might want to look there. But for other things like hoodoo, I mean, I've shared a few conjure books and things like that, but many of you, because they're published through Wiser and Llewellyn, many of you will have seen a number of those. It's highly beneficial to learn about these practices, but it's not something that you can kind of claim as your own unless, you know, you did indeed grow up in that environment, or, you know, I think in some cases some people were sort of brought in to the magic because they were family friends or whatever, and again, in that case, whatever, you know, you've been gifted with, and as long as you're following ethics, I guess, but it's for the own witch, I guess, to ethically decide. But there are people out there who will, you know, grifters and such, who will just learn a recipe from a hoodoo book and they'll go and make an oil and put it on Etsy and sell it. And, you know, many practitioners make magical oils, but to do like a hot foot powder or whatever and then sell that is something else, I think. Just something to bear in mind. Historically, something like baneful magic was perhaps more common because there were less rules for society in terms of like the law being there to protect. But however, as we are seeing, people's human rights being stripped away from them left, right and centre at the moment, and it is not good. I cannot imagine. It's terrifying. So I just want to send love to all of the LGBTQI plus communities and all of the BAME communities and anyone who is marginalised in any single way, you know, disabilities and neurodivergent and from a minority group or Black, Indigenous. I think we need to look after each other, so resistance is really important. But yeah, that's a aside. It's really relevant all the time. It's really relevant. Definitely baneful magic was used for that kind of conflict resolution. It was used for social disputes and stealing if people stole from you, or problems just with your neighbours, or like, you know, someone you didn't like. Whereas now I think there's much more of an emphasis, certainly if you are not coming from something like Santeria or Voudon or Hoodoo, then there's definitely more of a move towards ethics in witchcraft and things needing to be justified. If you are on that road, and definitely Wicca will have had something to do with that, because it was was moving away from that whole satanic panic in the 80s, and so there was that love and light era and the and ye harm none rede, Wiccan rede, and you know, there's ideas of karma and it coming back to you 3 times 3 and things like that, and these things have all sort of come from different places. The Wiccan rede, the short version is, and it harm none, do what you will, kind of also reflecting Aleister Crowley's do what thou will. The longer Wiccan rede was thought to be written in the 1950s, 1960s by Doreen Virtue. The idea of the threefold law, that something that you put out will come back to you times 3, that is also from some of Doreen Virtue's writing. It's actually very beautiful work, and Doreen Virtue's writing is lovely. So I have read some of her writing, I've read some of Gerald Gardner's writing, and it is worth reading, you know, especially if you're interested in Wicca. But it's important to know that for contemporary witchcraft, coming out of the time when Wicca was sort of popularised and really brought witchcraft into the mainstream, I think with that there's a lot of people that don't necessarily know, and also a lot of people that still will conflate witchcraft with Wicca, and so will imagine that every witch will not want to harm anyone, but also interpreting the interpretation of and it harm none, do what you will. You know, you can look at that like, well, cursing, hexing, jinxing, okay fine, but what about love spells? You know, if you're actually trying to manipulate the free will of somebody else against their will, that's baneful. And also then you think about other magics, like if you're trying to get money, then where's that coming from, you know? And also you have to put things to make sure you don't then accidentally lose someone you love and then get an inheritance or something like that. You also have to put those caveats in your magic if you're casting that kind of thing. But a job spell, it's an easy one to reference, right? Like, everyone needs a job, and if you're taking the job because you've got the edge because of your spell and that energy that you put towards it, then you're taking it away from someone else. That's definitely an example that I've heard a lot of other practitioners use, and it is very true. It's a good example of how any working can potentially have harmful elements to it. So that's something to consider as well. The idea of love and light, I don't know exactly where this came from. Now, I think that there's Doreen Virtue's decks, which I know Doreen Virtue with the angel decks, the angel numbers came out of that. That's definitely interesting, and actually her decks, even though she's done what she's done and she's now a born-again Christian and saying what we do is, you know, very sinful and all that, like, her decks are very good. I do think they're scarily accurate and they work really well, but that's just an aside. Then there's things like New Thought and Theosophy, definitely the Corpus Hermeticum, the Hermetica, and then the Kybalion as well, and then the Secret, you know, influencing certain like New Age spirituality. And I think it does get a lot of hate, that terminology, especially as well like with the consumerism of buying crystals and things like that. I think as well it is very much a conversation that's looped in with consumerism, but you know, that's not what we're touching on today. But there's certainly a sort of resentment for the term love and light these days, and I think a lot of practitioners probably used it without meaning that, you know, all I'm doing is sending out good and good vibes only, but actually that's now how the term is sort of perceived. And you know, a lot of people will talk about how they either walk a kind of middle path or that they walk a left path, you know, a left-hand path, and I definitely feel that I'm somewhere like a middle path or a left path. I mean, certainly I'm left I'm politically, you know, I'm green. I am a green voter, but in terms of magic, I do work with demonic spirits, I do work with left-hand path deities, and then also I work with deities like Jesus and Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene, but that's my path, you know. I'm not here to judge anyone else's either. But so we talked a little bit about historical context and the term black magic. There is absolutely a kind of cultural misrepresentation and like stigma around what it means to cast baneful magic or to throw a curse, and certainly I think Christianity has a lot to answer for with that. Certainly demonizing any deity that doesn't fit nicely into a little like packaged box. So the Morrigan, for instance, was not redeemable according to Christianity, so the monks wrote her in a very terrible light. And similarly with Bridget, you know, she was redeemable as a goddess of the hearth and the forge, and so she became Saint Bridget and became much more of a love and light figure. I think the love and light culture has definitely been influenced by Christianity and sort of the Abrahamic hold on society, how the cultural norms, the cultural morals and ethics are based upon those more Christian like traditions, and everything is very patriarchal. You know, this idea of like the sinful woman, you know, I'm reading some Charlotte Bronte at the moment, and the idea of Calvinism is coming in. Like, it's very, very interesting when you think about that idea of women being painted as these demons and sinful, like either just like sexual monsters or you know, evil. And Lilith fits very well into that box, obviously, but she's all of that and none of that as well. That's what she said to me. But I think there's that Abrahamic influence. There's definitely been the influence of Wicca, and that sort of like move away from no, there's no devil, and without like sort of saying, well, yeah, actually some witches do work with Lucifer, some witches work with Satan, some witches do work with a witch's devil, some witches work with other deities that can seem to be sort of demonic, or, you know, even gods like Zeus have done awful things in their lore. But again, like I said this in another video, like you're not supposed to look at those and sort of like apply them, like copy paste onto your life. They're sort of allegories and not necessarily all something that happened. They're sort of archetypal stories to teach us how to live and how to experience life and how we move through emotions. And certainly the Morrigan has written doing some awful things, and so has Lilith. And I have my own ways of kind of working around that lore, and I do think it's really important if you ever work with deities to look at original source material if you can. I do think that the kind of New Thought, Spiritualism, that's very Christian spiritualism, those kind of areas as well. The Secret is probably, and Love and Light is very, even if it's not explicitly demonizing Baneful Magick, it definitely feeds into this idea of it being something that's bad, something that practitioners should not do. I think, yeah, there's definitely this idea, like, if people find out that you're a witch and they don't really know what it's about, they're like, oh, you're gonna cast a spell on me, you're gonna turn me into a frog, or you're gonna, you know, and it's like, well, one, no, because the laws of physics and all of that stuff, but also then, like, no, because I don't really care, like, I'm not, like, I don't think about you, like, what? Oh god, it's so funny. But yeah, I think there are fears around it because of what's perpetuated within Hollywood, which can be really fun and really great. I mean, The Craft is obviously a natural thing that you think of, but then there are lots of modern day films that show like demonic possession, and I mean, Hereditary was terrifying, and that features King Paimon from the Geisha. There's a horror movie that I don't want to see because it involves like a child being unalive, the mother's grieving and stuff, but she can't remember what it's called. Someone will know, my friends have told me about it, but like she does the Abrahamic ritual rather to receive gnosis with the Holy Guardian Angel so she can like speak to her son. There are lots of really good films that are great, but they're not it's not like how it happens, that's not realistic. And there's a lot of demonization, I mean, even with the Epstein files, like, no, Jeffrey Epstein did not worship Baal, like he wasn't like dancing around sacrificing in the name of Baal. So he wasn't doing those things to worship a god. He was just an awful man doing terrible things. And yeah, maybe he had an interest in the occult like a lot of these white rich men do, but it is ridiculous to suggest that these people are demon worshippers. I mean, it's so dangerous for our occult communities, and it's also, it's just so disrespectful to, like, Satanists, for instance, are such peaceful people. They are often doing things in the community to look after people. They are the people that are like at the resistance, you know, they're really peaceful people. And I think it's just rich, isn't it, that Jesus would be absolutely, I think, incensed and disgusted and so sad if he was here. If he came down right now and he saw what was happening in his name, he'd be absolutely devastated. I have known Jesus and I've walked with Jesus. I love Jesus. He's a cool dude, and this is not in his name. It's like, no, not in my name, no, absolutely not. I feel like he's a demigod. Maybe he's a spirit, he's a demigod, but he is a principle of love. His principles around love are just laid out in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and it's just so beautiful. And I just think that's not what these rich men are doing. It's all in the name of church and Christianity. I mean, we get so much into this, but it's, I mean, and I'm not saying not all Christians as well, because I know that there are some Christians that are very open to this stuff and they watch this, so I'm not beating down the door of Christianity. But yeah, I do think that there's a lot that goes on in the name of Christianity that is awful, and then they're demonizing, you know, Satanists, Luciferian practitioners, people who work on the left-hand path, people who work with demons, goetic spirits, etc. Like, it's just ridiculous. I mean, when you think about what happened to Damien Echols, if you don't know, look it up. But yeah, his books are amazing. He's got so much occult knowledge and he's experienced it all, like within his body and like a proper experience of how the occult can really save you. And I think what happened to him was horrendous. So like, I think when you look at examples like that, you can really see how this is such a dangerous thing to perpetuate. So fear for sure. And also that like, oh, Harry Potter, you're going to do some Harry Potter magic. First of all, yes, JK Rowling, let's not go there, because it's so frustrating and so rude and so sad. But anywho, we're not here to talk about that today. But essentially, it's taken me a while to say this, but there is nothing that is like a moral code standard for occult practitioners. There's not like a rule book. It totally depends where you're coming from, what your circumstances are, what your background is, what your culture is, how you're raised. It depends on your morals, your ethics, and yeah, the individual witch. But it also depends on if you're coming out of a culture that is oppressed, if you're coming out of like a war, like a place of genocide, if you're in an occupation, if you have come up through Voudon or Santeria, or if you're a Hoodoo practitioner, you will have different views about this, because that's important when it's part of your heritage and it's part of your ancestry and it's part of your culture. And there is no way that I would ever sit here and say that anyone from any culture should not be doing a certain thing. I mean, I think a lot of people would agree these days about animals, those kinds of things, it's questioned. And certain religions and certain spiritual practices do things, but again, I don't know enough about it because it's not my area. But personally, I am of the belief that baneful magic is necessary sometimes, and that sometimes it is justified. And I think it is down to the individual to understand that, because also if you're raised in a home where there's abuse, where there's SA, or if you experience SA out in the world, you know, I myself have experienced SA a couple of times, and I did practice some magic after. It wasn't necessarily baneful. I have utilised binding spells, I've utilised banishing spells, I have utilised more malevolent spells in the past when people who I have loved have been in danger, their livelihood has been threatened. And these are the kinds of examples where it is justified. Someone's an abuser of women or children, or someone who, you know, commits slaughters and is atrocious in that way. I think that those kinds of things are justifiable, personally. But because there is no moral code, there's no, like, there are some people who will say it's not okay to do this, it's not okay to do this, I don't care who you are, what you are, you shouldn't be doing this. That's not my place to say. And I'm also just one witch on the internet. Like, I have a lot of experience with quite strong protection magic, a lot of experience. And that's where my experience really shines, I think. I know how to transmute energy. I know how to flip something back on someone, return to sender. It's very important. And I think it's, as a magical practitioner, it's quite important to know how these things work so that you can protect yourself as well, even if you have no intention of ever doing anything. And you might find that at some point, unfortunately, you have to. But you also might find you'd be surprised how infrequent that is. So, and it very much varies between practitioner to practitioner, and it's really important that every witch takes on the personal responsibility for it and see it play out, you know? And there are lessons that I'm sure many practitioners could tell you, and I think I probably have a few that I could tell you myself. But again, it's not the video for that, because I do not want to be referencing personal experiences too much. But it is important that each magical practitioner knows that they are responsible for their actions. And also, if you're not going to do it in real life, you sort of might have to question yourself about why you're trying to do it magically. Maybe you don't want to puncture someone's tyres, but you do want their car to be on the fritz or something like that, like, because there are different levels of, but so maybe you'd be doing something like that if someone's threatening you. But I think as well there are levels. I've been bullied in the workplace, and that was not a resort that I would like to take with anything like that. But there are things you can do to kind of redistribute people, to get them to move away and to get them to find something better, you know. There are ways to do this. There are also ways that you can create sort of tripwire spells, if not this then this type things. That's kind of how I see tripwire spells, in that sort of way, like boundaries, but then it's sort of, it's almost like, I don't know if any of you are familiar with like marketing, but like if anyone knows like CRM marketing and emails, and you have like an email path, and it's like if they choose this option, or if they purchase, then they go down this route and then they get this email, and then if they choose to click through, then they get another email sent to them, or if they don't choose to click through, then they get a different email sent. You know, it's like those like pathways. So it's a customer journey, right? It's a bit like that. It's a really weird analogy. So if not this, then this. So you can add those kinds of caveats into your workings, and I find that's really cool. And I think that as you advance in your practice, you'll learn how to layer techniques into spells. They might actually look really simple on the outside if they've not got many tools or materials, but they might actually be quite complex in terms of the things that you've layered in. Or they might look quite elaborate and actually be quite elaborate because of the kinds of things that you've layered in terms of intention and in terms of like variables and things that might move. Because also I've touched on a little bit, there are lots of variables that will be impacting your spell that you cannot control. And what happens when one of those goes awry or just comes in and like, and your spell's just knocked out the way. And so there are other things to consider, and you can't always know the outcome of your spell because it's not just a straight direct route. There are many occasions where that's the case. So it's definitely a case of judging it. But in the case where it's someone being annoying or being rude or throwing you under the bus, like oftentimes sweetening spells for your superiors or things to help you to ignore those people or something that will redirect them away from you is a good thing.
I will also share a link to my strategic witchcraft video that I uploaded last year, I believe, and in that video I do talk about timing being really important with a spell work, especially anything that's supposed to be influencing external factors. So not necessarily timing in the way that people typically think of with witchcraft and spells, because obviously planetary timing, the days of the week, etc., times of day have different correspondences to magical work, and you can layer those in within workings if they are relevant, if they are suitable, and if, you know, they will support your working. But really what we're talking about here is having a really good understanding of your situation, doing the work, the inner work, before you set your intention and make a plan for your working, and then also really understanding what the moving parts are and what is likely to occur. Now, in my experience, I know that a lot of people, when they are misbehaving, acting up and treating people badly, they will often just put their foot in it, and they will often show themselves to be exactly who you are experiencing them as, and they will show it in quite a big way and end up just exposing themselves very, very horrendously. Now, the timelines for that may differ, obviously, depending on your situation, but consider what is actually going on here, and consider also if there are alternative routes that you can take in order to sweeten your situation or to influence your situation versus theirs, rather than necessarily going straight for the baneful working, which, if you know it's something to do with a job and it's not something where they are actually hurting you or harming you, it might be preferable to go down this route. Or if it's something that you find out about and it's not necessarily your place to interfere, you can understand that eventually the wheel of fortune, as it were, in tarot will turn, and that those people will out themselves quite obviously. And it's something that I've observed throughout many years of my practice. So do take into consideration timing, and just consider moving variables as part of your spell working. And, you know, just consider what may occur if you do decide to do a working anyway. Consider that really carefully.
So you don't necessarily have to go full whack with it, but at the same time, like, I think in certain instances you can try a few things that don't necessarily work, and then maybe you might have to go to something you sort of level up. It depends on how bad it gets, but if you get sort of to the point where your livelihood is threatened, you know, you take responsibility for what you do. And I think it's important that whatever you put out there is sort of matched and it's justified, right? So you need to know that as a practitioner, you're willing to accept the consequences and responsibility for whatever plays out. That's really important. And I think that's why knowing yourself, knowing your whys, knowing your ethics and your morals, your boundaries, what you're okay with, I think that's really important before you even consider any kind of magic like this. But if you are at the start, learning protection magic is really key. And I think if you just learn about how some of these things happen, how some of these things do happen, how people do send out these things, because some people just like to practice, some people just like to send stuff to people. So it's really, really good to have a few wards, protection wards and shields and things, but also learning about how those things are done so that it can help your education. Along those lines, I do think that it's important to consider all the mundane things that you can do first. You know, there's a lot that you can do without having to like evoke a deity or evoke Michael or a goetic demon, or even just using your own energy that you know, draw up, anything like that. Like, before you do anything big as a kind of baneful magic, there are other things you can do. So anything legal that you have to do, setting boundaries with people and things like that, communication. It can often be a huge emotional release, and one of my beliefs is that when you are performing a baneful magic ritual or spell, there is so much power in that passion. Like, if you have so much anger, it can be really powerful. I mean, sometimes, don't get me wrong, being too emotional can make things a bit more unsteady. It can make things a bit wobbly. But I have seen so many great results through channeling a specific emotion. So it is really powerful. So that's something that you might want to play with in your practice. Not necessarily just with baneful magic, but with all kinds of spells, like utilizing your emotions and really kind of not mastering. I hate using the word mastering because I don't think anyone can master, but really getting into your emotions and understanding them, understanding your motivations, and really then like channeling an energy of an emotion. Energy in motion, right? Many people do consider things like binding and banishing and wards and even return to senders to be just protective magic, but some people will put them in the baneful magic box. I mean, I think things like banishings really probably are baneful, and those are the things like probably the most baneful magic that I do most frequently, but again, not that often. You'd be surprised how little you really do have to do these things, but it's really good to know. And then the types of different baneful magics. Jinxes are often like really kind of like jokes, practical jokes, but not fun practical jokes. Losing something, or like tripping over something, like losing your keys or getting a flat tire, like that, really like annoying but small embarrassment, you know, that kind of thing. Hexes are a little bit more like a bit of bad luck for a while, you know, so like a few things will go wrong and you might have to pay out a lot for your car or something, things like that. I mean, and that kind of thing sort of comes more into like spell jars and things like that, and you can have a domination jar, things like that. But curses that are strong, you have to put a lot more energy into them, and I can't say that's ever something that has ever appealed to me. Baneful magic I've performed has been protective, to send energy back, or it's been to protect myself from whatever was being sent, or to protect a loved one. So curses, I think there has to be a lot of justice there, in my view. You know, there should be a good reason for utilizing magic in such a way, but it can be very strong. It can take a lot of energy. Magic does wear off, but I think if someone is a strong practitioner and they are, you know, focused on it, I think it can work, and I think it can last for a long time. I think there's often this idea as well that we might be cursed and we might have cursed ourselves, and I think that's a bit of like a thought form, egregore type thing that we sort of create ourselves a little bit, and a lot of that again can be in the mind, but it's important that we allow ourselves to explore what's going on in our minds without judgment at the same time. So I hate this whole sort of, well, if you have a, you know, negative thought, then negative things are going to happen to you. That just is so cringe to me. Very new age manifestation, and it's not my vibe at all. And good vibes only. Like, no. We're real here, and we're in the dirt, we're in the crap, we're in the weeds. Like, I think of myself as kind of like a bog witch. Like, I'm in the freaking earth, you know. I will dissect, and I'm a Scorpio by sign and by nature, you know, not sun, but my rising sign is Scorpio, and I'm absolutely that person. I will delve deep into the shadows, and I'm of the generation where Pluto is in my first house as well, in Scorpio, so yeah, it's very, very important for me. Then there's other kind of grayer areas, like I said, like some people will sort of feel that banishings are baneful, and I think I do, even though they're sort of protective. It's because they are then focused back on that person, like really need that person away from me now because they are harmful, they are harming me, they are harming this person. And I think it can be really powerful, you know. And then, like I said, there are other ways to do it that you can be less, get this person away from me. And to be honest, when I have done those kinds of spells, I have also stipulated that I don't want that person to get hurt, because I have felt that with the energy that I've sent back, or for whatever banishing, like it's very strong, and I definitely know that for me, I wouldn't want a person to become hurt. I just want them away from me, right? Like, so there are certain circumstances where it's kind of suitable for you to create something better for a person to go into. You know, if they're just mildly annoying, you just want them to go away. You can sort of feel a bit better about it by, you know, putting some nice things in there for them, just like so they have a nice time but they go away from me. But if someone's literally like causing you pain, like I don't want anything good to happen to them particularly, but also I don't really want anything bad to happen to them. So like for me, that's something that I have put in the past, because you know that's clear for me. Like I just want them away from me and to leave me alone, to leave the people I love alone, but like I don't want them to receive harm necessarily. Then there's things like love spells. Now domination, love spells, again, like they have a place. I mean, there's a lot of wonderful love spells that are great for couples that are together, and you know that's something that they can do together, you know, making marriages stronger, you know. So if you're looking for a relationship but you're not like manifesting a specific person, you're manifesting a person that is right for you, you know, that can be beautiful. The self-love spells, etc. But if you are utilizing bodily fluids, for instance, and feeding them to a person, which to be fair, there's some excellent examples. This book that I shared in my books of last year, there's this excellent chapter about I've forgotten what it's called, it's like bum bread or something, it's like, or vagina bread or something. I can't remember, but it's like, it's a bread that was said to be put up the lady part and then fed to whoever she had. Yeah, like I have to find this, How to Find Love. I can't find it, but they were said to have kneaded the bread with their bums. I can't remember what they called it though, if they even did have a name for it, but it's in the chapter on how to find love. It's like the second chapter. It's very interesting, but it's important to understand the context of these as well. Like any kind of domination spell in this way, like a lot of these come out of Hoodoo, and again, women were often put into positions that were dangerous for them, so they were doing these things to their lovers. Sometimes they were a slave to their partner, who basically owned them and mistreated them, you know, and then these some of the ways that they were able to get some control back. So again, it's important to understand the context. I would never do that kind of spell to get somebody to fall in love with me. I would do a spell to find love, but not on a specific person. That's when you're in the realms of sort of like messing with people. Now, my husband and I have been together for 17 years and I've cast spells with us together. You know, I've done magic, we've done magic together, and I would do a spell with him and he wouldn't necessarily know what I was doing, but I would talk to him about it first, make sure he's okay with it, but he wouldn't necessarily know exactly what I'm doing, but he would know that it was for us to maybe get closer, or you know how couples are. So it's like having time and energy into a relationship. It doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong, but it's definitely the context, and again, it's down to the practitioner. But again, all the time it's really important for it to be justified and for you to understand what the consequences of these actions are. I am not going to necessarily go into too much about individual kind of spells, because as I said, there's a lot of different types of magic we're talking about here, like in the Baneful Magick category, like banishings and bindings, hexings, jinxing, curses, etc. And so I think depending on what it is you're doing, you want to be very sure and you want to have explored all of the shadow stuff behind it for yourself. Personally, I think being yourself, coming prepared with energy is good, not riled up and in tears, but certainly feeling the energy. But when I talk about channeling it, it's important to be able to harness that. So again, the key core concepts of being able to center, ground, root into the earth, to pull up energy, raise energy then, and work with that energy to then send it out towards your target with your intention. Those are really, really key. So you really need to have a good understanding of how magic works. And really, I think if you're a new practitioner, it's not a good place to start. You know, protection magic is key, and if you are a beginner, I think protection magic, go for it. You know, there are lots of great books on there as well, and there are some great books on this kind of more baneful magic as well. But again, take things with a pinch of salt, because there are things about things like graveyard dirt and things like that, and you get into other grey areas. Now, utilising graveyard dirt is not something I've ever done, because I don't feel I've ever needed to, but it's also something that I don't feel I'm justified in really utilising yet. But I think practitioners can do it in a certain way that is ethical, but there's a lot that goes into that because of the legalities and your location and dangers and things like that. So then also you've got graveyard etiquette, and there are a lot of practitioners that will talk about this and lay out ways that you can make sure it is ethical, but then again, that might not be copy paste ethical in every place. So again, that's a really important thing that each practitioner needs to navigate themselves. Utterly Wicked is a good basic book around curses and baneful magic, but again, there are some questionable elements in it around things like graveyard magic and things around appropriation. So it's really just important to know about those before jumping in. And also I think just really important when you're reading. A lot of ingredients and correspondences have that really nice sympathetic magic thing whereby the plant is great for baneful magic and it happens to be toxic. You know, they sort of have those properties. Not all, and a lot of plants are really, really beautiful for it. You know, things like stinging nettles I absolutely love because I think they're great for so many things. They're great for health and vitality and energy and that fire, but yeah, they are also really, really good in any kind of protective baneful working. I also really like things like blackthorn. I love roses because of the thorns. You've got like a complete magical potion in a rose, and that's one of the reasons it's one of my ancestral plant spirit allies. There are a bunch of other herbs that you can use. I would again advocate that you just work with the plants that know you, so the plants on your land. So I have a lot of mugwort around me, a lot in my garden. Mugwort is a great protective herb. I have it all around my house and it is just beautiful. So like plants that you know you, that you work with, that you connect to the spirit of, that you talk to, that you see throughout the season, that you grow, that you already, you know, whisper your intention to and you blow your energy onto, and you already hold it in your hand and you already make incense out of it and you already use it on oils, and or any herbs, you know, that you use in cooking. There can be some great herbs that you use in cooking that can also help. Things like pepper and salt. You have it. Everyone has that. You know, those things in your area, in your location, bioregionality, those things are going to be the things that work best for you. So don't be ordering strange things off the internet. There's no point, honestly. There's just no point. A lot of things can be replaced or supplemented. A lot of things can be used in place of something else, you know. Of course, things like bodily fluids, like I mentioned before, which need to be extracted safely and ethically. So as a person who menstruates, I do have blood every month that I can utilise, and that is basically what I use. You can use hair, nail clippings, but you know, it's important that you consider around, do you want to be using your own materials in that kind of magic? Some maybe yes. I personally don't. I will utilise my signature sometimes, signing it off, unless I'm utilising a bodily fluid or something like that as an offering. I don't tend to mix my taglocks in when I'm doing that kind of magic, unless there's a specific need for it.
Potentially it's worth doing a full video on this, because there are ways and times when it is appropriate for people to utilise their own bodily fluids within workings. Specifically taglocks to tie a working to you. You may use bodily fluids if you're creating some kind of decoy, protection, amulet or jar or pot. Many people use their own bodily fluids within witches' bottles, witches' jars, which are essentially apotropaic protection magic, and that is relevant. And some may consider utilising bodily fluids for domination work, and some to contain the magic, as believed to be sort of marking themselves as the origin, and therefore then separating themselves from the target of the operation. However, this is not something that I tend to do with this kind of work. There are places for it, however, and it has been done within a context that makes sense for the spell. And it really depends on the situation and the kind of working that you're doing and what tradition it's coming out of. So it's not never, but in many cases, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because I feel that it would be tying myself to the work that I don't want to come back to me. In cases where it would make sense, so dominating someone because you want your money that they've not paid you or something along those lines, to have power over someone would probably make sense. However, in many cases, I would avoid that. And there are ways that you can include tripwires in your spell and certain herbs that will also keep your identity protected as well, so that it can't come back to you and it's kind of tied off after it's released from you. It won't come back. So these are areas that we can explore if there's some interest in it.
If it's someone who's close to you and you have a kind of relationship that involves something like that, it might make sense. You know, if you can get any personal effects of the person, hair, nail clippings, whatever, hair from a hairbrush, you know, you can do that. It's not necessary, you can just use their name. Or if you don't know their name, you can just, you know, the person who is hurting you, attacking you, whatever. Kate Froiler wrote a book, Blood and Bone, is it? And it's all about the dark moon and workings on the dark moon, and I think there's a lot of kind of more baneful magics in there, and that's a really, really great time because it's all about ending cycles, right, and finishing things off and releasing and banishing. So it works really well for this kind of magic. There are also other deities and figures you might wish to call on. So Archangel Michael, I mentioned earlier, I tend to ask Michael to protect me every day after I do the LBRP, and I talk to my deities a lot. So Lilith and the Morrigan are great for Baneful Magick, and the Morrigan has always come through in a pinch for me when I've needed her. Hecate as well, obviously, is a star, shining star for us all, and Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene have much more come through for me with self-love workings. Obviously earlier I talked about how with all spells you can have this element of not really knowing, because you can do a spell in a certain way that you know is supposed to work in a certain way, but then something else that you have no idea about, that you have no influence on, is going to come in and just completely, take your little candle off the table, and it's not going to matter. So there definitely is an unpredictability, and also, as I said, I do think that when your emotions are more heightened and all over the place, it can be harder for the energy to find that root. So channeling it is really important because there is that element of unpredictability, and it's really important again to put those clauses in. Like I said, if you don't want someone to get hurt, or if you don't want their family to get hurt, it's really important to put those in because they may. Also, again, really important to not be throwing curses, hexes and jinxes around for fun. Like, it's not fun. It's a very serious practice. All of witchcraft and magic is a serious practice, and it's a great responsibility and a great gift to wield. It's a great honor. It's a great privilege. So, it's something we do have, and it's something that, there's a reason why Baneful Magick was utilized by people who did not have privilege in other ways at all. So, they developed these practices for that reason. And so really honor that in terms of looking at what's happened to you. If you've experienced a great amount of abuse and horror at the hands of a person, and this is the final, straw for you, and you are okay with what could potentially happen, you make that choice. I think that there are times when these things are justified. I think with these workings, you can also work with ancestors, deities, as I've said. Shadow work is a really core component of any magical practice. And again, with this kind of work, I think it's important to look at those things. If you find yourself in a place where it's time to be sending out some Baneful Magick, then it's also probably some time to do some shadow work, around whatever it is that's happening. It doesn't mean to say that you've done something wrong. It's just what's happening, what's going on. So it's really important to have that accountability, to take responsibility, to really respect where this magic has come from and not play around with it because it's very serious. And to have that emotional kind of discipline and control, not mastery, as I said, didn't want to say that, but really think about these things and be careful. So what about when spells go wrong or if things get backlash? I don't think that if you are protected yourself and you are justified, that things will necessarily return. I do believe in a form of balance, but at the same time, I've witnessed a lot of injustice and it's not in any kind of balance. So that is something, an ever-evolving kind of question for the practitioner, and it's an ever-evolving question for me. I will admit that. So personally, I have not seen 3 times 3. That's not something I believe. I do believe that we should aim to not harm people in all things. But I believe that if someone is hurting you, and if it's a case of, someone coming into your home and trying to hurt you and your family, obviously you protect yourself, you protect your family. And I think it comes down to that, and that these things come out of that kind of desperation. And that's why, again, it's so important to respect the practices and the traditions. And even if it's not something you want to do, that's absolutely fine. But understand why other people might. And also understand other traditions, that's not something we could ever fully conceptualize ourselves if we're not part of. But understanding that historical context really, really does help. And then also really examining our whys, or examining, our ego, doing that shadow work, checking it, and being responsible for what we do and having integrity, really standing in it. I think that's all we can really do. I think Baneful Magick can really serve to be healing for a lot of people, especially SA survivors. I think it can help people to feel like they have a little bit more control. I think certainly I felt banishings have been so helpful in terms of feeling safe again, moving away from pain and grief and sadness, and yeah, feeling a sense of control again. And I think that that is really key. So essentially, if I had any recommendations from today for beginner practitioners, I would say deep dive into protection magic, rigorous protection magic, and it will help you to understand a little bit more about some of these things as well, I think. And then if you are a bit more advanced and you want to learn more, definitely reading things like this, other books about folk magic in the region you're interested in, reading more about Voudon or Santeria, reading more about Hoodoo, not necessarily adopting, just whatever you're interested in. Perhaps reading parts of the Pictrix or reading parts of the PGM, you know, the Greek Magical Papyri, can be really interesting for that historical study and that lens through which we can see the magic and the kinds of things that we think of them now. You know, a lot of them will call for certain animal blood and sacrifices and things, and again, that's not something that today we would advise or stand by at all. That's not something I would advocate at all or support. And so there's a lot that's different, but also a lot that we need to honour. And I feel that I have been talking for a long time. I hope that I've shed some light on some topics. I think there's probably so much more to say, especially about individual types of rituals and practices, and it's never going to be completely comprehensive because I'm only one practitioner. So go do your research, look into the curse tablets, you know, it's really interesting. Look into any of the things I've mentioned and learn a little bit for yourself about some of the origins, learn about the historical context, certainly as well about some of the ways that there have been a stigma as well. Learn about Wicca, for instance. You can go ahead and do that and it might help you to understand a little bit more about what we've been talking about today. So please let me know if you've got any thoughts below. If you've got any experiences you want to share, you feel like you'd like to do so, please do. If you'd like to see more from me around this topic and you want me to talk a little bit more in depth about some of my own experiences practicing this kind of magic, do let me know, and potentially there could be a Patreon video. If you have any questions at all, please let me know below and I will try and answer them. Also, anyone else, feel free to answer. Again, like I said, I'm one person. This is not exhaustive. I do not know everything. I am still learning in my practice, as I always will be. I am merely sharing what I have learnt and what I understand and what I feel and believe and what I have received as personal gnosis from the deities I work with, etc. over time. And yeah, I hope that it has been supportive and helpful on your journey. I hope you enjoyed it as well. It was a bit entertaining maybe, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day. Please do like, share, comment, subscribe, leave a little wand emoji or a sparkle emoji maybe for like magic. I'm on Instagram, there's an old TikTok page, there's Patreon of course, and if you would like to get a reading from me, please pop me an email. My email address is down below and in the link tree, and so you'll be able to find me and ask me what you'd like to receive in terms of a reading, what kind of things you're interested in terms of question or theme, and in terms of length and what format and things. So I'm just trialing things out to see what people really want at the moment. You can support me if you like to with Patreon, or there's Ko-fi or Buy Me a Coffee, or the direct PayPal link, or there's the super thanks below, which is always really received with gratitude and so much thanks from me. And yeah, I feel really supported by the community and I'm very grateful to be here and to be able to share. It feels like a great privilege to me. So thank you again. I would love to see you again soon as well. Please let me know if you've got any videos that you'd like to see from me. As always, I hope you stay well and safe and look after yourselves, and I will see you again in another video really soon. Many blessings. Mwah. Bye.